The main conversation around the Pantheon Rise of the Fallen community right now is, of course, the road to alpha. And this man is where the rubber meets that road. Creative and programming producer Joppa Perkins recently appeared on the monthly Visionary Realms Developer Roundtable with community manager Ben Kilson-Walters to answer community questions about the state of the game. Now, the current state of the game might not make as much sense if you're not familiar with what has led up to it. So if you haven't already, watch my video which recaps Pantheon's entire development process since day one in only 20 minutes. I'll include a link to that in the upper right because that's important context for what we'll learn in this video. Now, the roundtable was about 2 hours long, and it covered a lot, but I know many of you just don't have time to listen to a whole 2-hour discussion, so that's why I'm here with the highlights. And remember, if you don't want to miss out on any Pantheon development updates moving forward, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell now, because that's exactly what this channel is dedicated to. I'm not affiliated with the game, I've just been following it for a long time now, and I want to make it easier for you to follow as well. So enough with the fanfare, let's jump right into it. Joppa stated that the plan is for all races and classes to be included in alpha, but he also expanded on some previous statements about how long it takes the devs to actually implement a new class into the game.
The time frame that we mentioned, roughly 2 weeks for the easier to implement class, up to potentially 4 weeks for the ones that have more complicated mechanics or systems, that is accurate. What we could have clarified more is that class implementation is not always happening. It's not an always on process that's going on this development team, because specifically we have a small programming team. And so we do everything according to a specific planned timeline and sequence of implementation. The classes need to wait for their turn in our march to alpha. Now, we're not going to be sitting down and doing, all classes at once. So it's like we have a class section and then we do all the classes, left at one time. We've broken them down into chunks of implementation. And this is addressed later in the conversation, but the monk and the ranger and the summoner are the next three on deck, because they represent the most complicated of the remaining class-oriented gameplay mechanics and systems to support them. And so we want to get those done sooner than later, because we want to have time to address issues and difficulties that may come up from trying to implement and work through those complex systems. We don't want to save the most complex systems for when we're getting really close to when we want to get alpha out there and then have to scramble. So we're doing those first. And that's a big part of the whole timing and sequence of everything.
One of the most vital and monumental hurdles to get Pantheon truly ready for alpha is the implementation of their allegedly cutting-edge proprietary network tech. There are thousands of testers already signed up for alpha, and if the servers can't support that load, any chances of fun and productive testing just go out the window. Now, this new network stack that lead programmer Kyle Olson designed will supposedly make that a non-factor, but of course getting it to work is easier said than done.
Holistic MMO scale networking stack solution takes easily 6 to 8 months when you're doing it literally from scratch, sitting down to do that. What Kyle did so well is he looked at the refactor that needed to happen, and basically in just about every aspect of the refactor, regardless of what system it was or what area of the code he was working on, because this is his networking stack, because he is the creator of it, he's the architect of it, he understands how it works, he was able to, in tandem with refactoring these actual systems and code, build in the hooks for the new networking stack as he was doing that. And so it was effectively shaved 3 to 4 months off of the total process. So instead of looking at like a 6 month, okay, Kyle's going off for 6 months to get this done, we're looking at like a 2 month process, and that 2 months being much lighter in the sense that it's not like he's going to be in an isolation chamber. He's still going to be providing support in various areas programming wise. But it's also really important for us right now to situate our programmers, namely we're talking about Kyle and Rob, to do as much work as possible on aspects of our alpha development plan that give the designers, the artists, and anyone else working on the actual games development as much runway as possible, so that work can be happening concurrently.
One of the most publicly analyzed aspects of Pantheon, and really any MMO, is the combat. We players spend a ton of time in combat, so it needs to be good. And in the past, combat in Pantheon has been pretty basic. Not necessarily bad, just basic. But the developers are finally reaching a point now where they can start incorporating ideas they've actually had for a while that are intended to push the boundaries of difficult and strategic combat.
Happening concurrently. So, for example, we're about to go into a combat awareness phase of development where we're taking NPC AI, decision making, conditional logic for combat, NPCs being better outfitted to just more aware of their surroundings and more aware of other NPCs in their vicinity. I mean, it's funny because right now, again, we're talking about all this in a post-refactor context, but when we say refactored, like we really did go down to bare bones on some of these systems and the code supporting them, in order to build them back up properly in a scalable way. And NPCs is a big one that was really, pretty well gutted. And what we have now is kind of back to good, but in kind of the basic expected sense in terms of NPCs being able to pursue, being able to wander, to have their routines that they do, and then to understand the combat, the schema of combat in terms of establishing target, an offensive target, and attacking that target, and responding to various criteria and stimulus and within combat, and so on and so forth. But what they're going to soon do is be able to, in a much more robust way, respond to lots of different stimuluses in combat. So being able to better recognize when players are in various states of being able to recognize when they themselves are in various states of being, and most importantly, being able to better recognize when other NPCs that are friendly with them are in various states of being. So the ability for NPCs to heal other NPCs in a much more tactile way, not just healing, and whenever their healing spell is off cooldown, they cast their heal. But I see that, my NPC ally over here is in this threshold of health and they're stunned. So what I need to do before I heal them is I need to break them free from that stun and then use my instant cast heal to heal them more quickly. Those kinds of things.
Nice.
Really, really excited about that getting online, because the foundation of when we all this talk we do about challenge and we want Pantheon to be a very tactical game. That's a huge part of that recipe, because you're becoming more aware that NPCs are able to do a little bit more thinking on their part to assess what's going on and respond appropriately.
Part of what makes MMOs so difficult to create is that they require incredible amounts of developer-made content. So even if you have all the races and classes, lightning-fast servers, and exciting combat, alpha would quickly fall flat if there isn't enough to do and places to go. More specifically, that means creating enough handmade art assets to fill all those zones. 3D art by nature is a very laborious process, so with such a small team, it stands to wonder how that's going.
When you think of what we want for alpha, and that is ultimately King's Reach, and this is a point we're going to clarify a little bit and talk through next week, because when we're looking at alpha, we're also looking at a season of time. So, there are things in the road to alpha that we would categorize as needing by alpha launch, like day one, and then there are things that need to be done by the end of alpha, and therefore will be part of the ongoing development happening during alpha. And King's Reach is one of those things. We've talked about the specific zones we want and need and plan to have available when alpha launches, and then the remaining King's Reach zones will be brought up along with that. And it's very significant because when we talk about King's Reach, we're talking about more than a third of the game's world. King's Reach is only one of the 3 launch continents, but it's also the largest of the 3, meaning it has the most zones and the most landmass. But even more importantly, good MMO development embraces smart reusability of assets. So considering all of the assets that need, and really just smart game development as a whole, all the assets that are needed to create King's Reach and make it everything that it's meant to be and fill the zones, everything from rocks and trees to all of the various props, large and small, that make up the set dressing for these areas, not to mention the additional, flora and, different natural elements. The ability to reuse many of those assets smartly is what's going to allow the other 2 continents to take shape much more quickly. So when we're looking at a timeline to launch, finishing King's Reach gives us a really, really strong leg up in finishing everything else.
A lingering point of confusion among those who have been following Pantheon since at least late 2018 is the status of Project Faerthale. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay, because Joppa explained the journey they've taken and how, if at all, Project Faerthale fits into the current picture.
What started with Project Faerthale really kind of became the spirit of what we've been doing wholesale, including the refactor and everything that we've been working on, which is essentially to get Pantheon in a state where the as much of a full expression of what it is to play Pantheon can be experienced. Now, the original goal was with Project Faerthale, and our focus was on that single zone of Faerthale, not only system-wise, but also art-wise. We wanted to develop our visual aesthetic as well to be indicative of the standard of visual that we want to achieve. But throughout the process of working on that zone, it became clear that it was forcing us, because of what we were wanting to do with the referential experience, being 1 to 50, being all game systems, and everything present. It was forcing us to build this zone in a way that was not. It was falling back into that old pattern of like, let's just make something for the purpose of some kind of milestone that we're trying to execute, rather than what is Faerthale, like what does Faerthale need to be. And it doesn't need to be a level 1 to 50 experience. None of our zones need to be that overtly you can level from 1 to 50 without ever leaving the zone. That's going to have a very, very negative effect on the game world and the integration of players and various things. So we kind of emancipated Project Faerthale from being restricted to that one zone. We began to look more at a sequence of zones that, in a contiguous sense, could represent that 1 to 50 path, and therefore looking at, how do we integrate the game systems, not every system in every one of those zones, but holistically across that gamut, Pantheon can be experienced in its fullness. And then with the work that we did through the refactor and with all the development of those systems and the game and the pipelines, then it also became clear that we needed a very, very short form representation of that experience that could be very quickly consumed by, potential someone who may be interested in investing, or any kind of an evaluation-based situation where we wanted the essence of Pantheon to be able to be consumed in a much quicker fashion. That's where, kind of flowing out of all that Project Faerthale spirit and work, we created the evaluation area, which again, it sounds artificial or facadical to call it that. It is in reality a literal place in the game world. Fortress Devair is a legitimate location, legitimate lore. It's all canon, but we were able to use that to create a very, very small slice to do that evaluation experience in, which also just helped us move, the systems further, even more so by working on them in that environment.
Those are what I consider the key takeaways from this roundtable. As I said earlier, the full Q&A was a lot longer, and Joppa always provides really valuable insight. So if you're the type of person who wants to consume every last bean, I highly suggest you listen to the full thing, and I'll include a link to it in the description. Oh, and also the next developer Twitch stream on May 13th at 9 p.m. Eastern is also going to provide more progress updates on their alpha to-do list. And as usual, I'll be hosting a community watch party for this on my own Twitch channel, twitch.tv/BazgrimTV, where we can all react to the news together, and I'll provide some commentary as well. So I look forward to seeing you there, but until then, stay curious and adventure on.